Hello YouTube, and welcome part 2 of our U-Boat tutorial, tips, tricks, and getting started. I am Lightly Salted and I will be your host for today. In the last episode we ran through the mechanics of the game, and today, like I promised, we're going to be getting into loading supplies into the ship. So we've got Mr. Klaus Graf selected, our skipper, and we're going to head on over here to the warehouse. The warehouse is where we're going to pick up all the things we require. Also, this is where you will find upgrades for your ship after you have finished researching them. Myself, before I go to the warehouse and start purchasing things, I like to make sure that I've set my U-boat up to the best of my abilities to accept the amount of things I plan on stuffing into it. So we're going to take Mr. Osterman. Mr. Osterman is going to head over here to the supply room. We're going to right-click, open it up, and we're going to take a look at what we've got in the galley. In the galley we have a bunch of fish, a bunch of potatoes, and we're going to slam in the rest of this preserved pork to make some space here in our storeroom. Now, the storeroom, this amount of slots in which to put in your food and other equipment, this will never change. Ergo, freeing up space in here is going to be priority 1 before loading up your boat with supplies to head off to patrol. So we've managed to cram as much food as we can into the galley, and that's fine. So we have some room for some more preserved pork, some for some more bread. Again, food can go up to 100, and we have 3 empty slots. We can definitely make some more room, though. So let's take a look at that. Why don't we grab our mechanic, Mr. Watcher. Mr. Watcher will take a look in the storeroom, and we're going to give him all of our replacement parts. So while you can stack 5 replacement parts at a tile, you can also stack 5 replacement parts in the backpack of one of your officers. So by handing those off to him, this just frees up a little extra room in our storeroom. Plus, if I give him some spare parts and give my other engineers some spare parts, well then, everybody's going to have some spare parts. Let's go ahead and give him those spare parts. So he now has 4 spare parts in his inventory. We're also going to give him, here in the forward cabinet, we're going to open up that, and we're going to hand him a breathing apparatus, a rebreather. And the reasoning for that is a lot of times when you get damaged underwater, the areas you're going to be working in are completely flooded, and you will need a rebreather in order to get in there and make repairs. So now that he's got his fully charged rebreather, you see it says 100, and this number will go down as they use their rebreathers, by the way. We know there's one more rebreather in our cabinet, so we're going to select Mr. Oldorp, our other engineer. He's going to head over to the cabinet and get himself the other rebreather. Excellent. After he's finished gathering his rebreather, we're going to select Mr. Hagenow. Mr. Hagenow is my chief bosun. He is my second in command. He is also a leader type and can use all observation posts and things that require sight. Like we talked about in the last video, things that require sight include the guns. Ergo, Mr. Hagenow is going to be my go-to gunning guy. So we're going to outfit him with that helmet we talked about in the last episode. There he is, looking all dapper with this helmet. Now you'll notice, as I gave things to the engineers, they can hold the spare parts and the rebreather. Most of your officers can hold 2 different things so long as they fall under different item types. For instance, he can hold these from the storeroom and these from the cabinet. You can't hand him 2 stacks of spare parts. That's not going to work out that way. That would make it a little bit too easy for us. So we won't be doing that. Now, Mr. Hagenow, since he is our gunnery guy, he's going to be heading over to the storage room here. And I noticed that we have 40 large caliber HE rounds for the deck gun hiding here in the storage room. Well, let's take a look at our deck gun here on the side. And lo and behold, we have space for more ammunition stored up by the deck gun itself under the deck plates. Here's the deck gun itself, and storage is right here under this hatch. So we're going to take him over to the storage room, open it up, take these HE rounds, look at the deck gun, and move them directly from storage to the deck gun. Now we're going to move all 40 because we have enough room with our 750 kilogram maximum weight parameters. So we're going to hit transfer. Yes. Now he as a little icon here saying that he's moving stuff to storage. He would also like some help. Now in the last video we touched upon giving people helpers, and let's get into it a little bit further than that. You can see here that all of your officers have these little bars just to the bottom left of their badges, icons, pictures. And some are green and some are beige. The green ones indicate that they would very much enjoy having some help. So if I give him 2 more helpers, you can see here that as they climb up and down the conning tower, these fellas here are actually donning their backpacks and they're helping out. So he is using those 2 ordinary crew to help him move the ammunition. So that's going to really cut down on the amount of time we need for him to move all 40 rounds. Conversely, you'll see here Mr. Osterman. He has a green square available and a beige square. If we were to give him 2 helpers, he'll take both, but only one can actually be active in his duties. The other will be completely idle. We have 1 idle member and 1 useful member. So while Mr. Hagnow is moving the HE rounds for us, we're going to take one more look in the storage room. We're going to use Mr. Osterman to do that. Take a peek. We've got medkits. Now, Mr. Osterman, on top of being our radio officer as per his job down here, I am going to change his duties to be the medic. Now, he can still use all of his radio man powers to operate the radio and the hydrophone, but now whenever a crew member is sick or injured, his first priority is going to be dropping everything and heading on over to that member to make sure that they're going to make it through the night. So since he is our medic, we're going to open up the storeroom, and he is going to be gifted all 4 of these first aid kits, or med kits. Now our medic is going to be outfitted with the tools he's going to need to keep our crew happy and well. So he's completed doing that task. We're going to take our skipper, Mr. Klaus Graf. We're going to take one more peek in the storeroom here. Okay, we've got some scrap metal. We don't really need scrap metal. Currently in build 126 hotfix 3, we have not much of a use of the scrap metal. Now, if we were at sea for quite a long time and had battle after battle and had to repair thing after thing, well, we could use the scrap metal to put together some replacement parts. But we're not going to really concentrate on that now. We also have potassium absorbers. Now, these are designed to scrub your ship's air when you're stuck underwater for an extended period of time. You could use this gear here for the ventilation system and recirculate the air in your boat, and that will keep you breathing for quite some time on its own, believe it or not. However, it is extremely noisy and it uses battery power. It uses our electrics from the last video. You don't want to be running on ventilation alone for too very long. And the reason for that is, while the air is circulating inside your boat, it's getting more and more choked with carbon dioxide from your crew, so you're going to need those potassium absorbers in order to scrub the air. So currently, we could open up the ventilation right here on the right, and we could place those 20 potassium absorbers to a maximum of 40 into the ventilation to free up this slot. However, I don't anticipate us needing them right away, and frankly, it's more of a use it when you need it kind of thing. So we'll concentrate on that, once we get out to sea in the next couple of videos. So I think we've emptied out the storeroom as best as we possibly can. Yes, it looks that way. So let's take our skipper, Mr. Graf, and we're going to head on over here to the warehouse. And we're going to be talking to Mr. Hans Fischer. He is our quartermaster. He's running the warehouse for us. So we've got 3 options down here. Show me what you've got, opens up resupply. I want to upgrade my ship, enters the ship upgrade mode. We can't do anything with the ship upgrades at the moment because we have nothing researched. And we have, of course, goodbye. So let's take a look at option 1. Show me what you've got. Click on the screen, and the resupply menu appears. So right now we're in the absolute top slot here on your left, equipment. Now equipment covers things such as med kits, spare parts, potassium absorbers, and sonar decoys. We don't have access to more potassium absorbers just yet, nor do we have sonar decoys. And the reasons for that are we have not researched them yet. You get those initial 20 potassium absorbers gratis from the game because it expects you to die. Ergo, we're not able to get access to those right away. Now, I mentioned I'd like to get rid of these spare parts, and I'm going to do that just by right-clicking on them here, just to free up this slot. They have absolutely no value, so we can't get any money for them. We will transfer them, and our budget is still 6,000. Now, I've given 4 spare parts to Mr. Watcher. I would like more spare parts in order to give to our other engineer. So we're going to take all of these 19, move them here, and it's only going to let us move a maximum of 5. Unfortunately, you can't just type a number and move as many as you want in one shot. It just doesn't work that way. So we'll transfer the 5, and we're going to be giving those to our chief engineer very, very shortly. So let's head down to food. Food, glorious food. Okay, we have a lot of food available. We're just going to clean this up a little bit. I like to keep my equipment on this side of the screen just to make everything a little more accessible at a quick glance. We could take some bread. We could take some fruit, cheese, vegetables, fish, sausages, and canned fish. Now, as we touched upon in the last video when it comes to morale, having multiple kinds of food is very, very important in keeping discipline up. So what we're going to do, we're going to take some vegetables. Everybody loves a little bit of veggies. We're going to take some cheese. Cheese is excellent for morale. 3,000 budget left. I think we're going to revisit food here in a moment. Let's head down to ammunition. Now you can see here we have access to small caliber HE ammunition for the flak gun. So this is primarily for taking out aircraft, but it can be used on other boats, of course. You have your small caliber armor piercing ammunition, again for the flak gun, and large caliber armor piercing ammunition. So if we take a look at our deck gun is going to be absolutely maxed out once Mr. Hagnow finishes moving those rounds for us. So we have no more room for additional ammunition for the deck gun. We could, of course, throw in a few extra rounds to our storage room, but I think we might need these slots, if not now, then a little bit later on. Let's move these over. I don't know why they were there. Okay. So that's ammunition. I think we're going to leave our ammunition as is, open up the flak gun. We have 1,000 rounds of armor piercing and 3,000 rounds of HE ammo. I think that's going to be fine for our first time out. Let's move on to fuel. You can see here that our fuel is sitting at 100,000 of 110,000 kilo, so we're going to fill the boat. Now, disclaimer, the game in its early access mode considers fuel to be almost completely worthless. It's going to cost us 10 budgets to completely fill our tanks with thousands and thousands of kilograms of fuel. So we're going to be happy about that and say thank you and take them. We're down to 3,154 budget. Move on to torpedoes. Okay, torpedoes. So we've got the bow storage room. Since we have things in the storage room, that lets us know that the 4 tubes in the front of the boat are already loaded with torpedoes. So this would be additional torpedoes outside of the tubes. We talked on how many you can take in the last video, and that would be 14. So we have a lot more room for a lot more torpedoes. In the stern, I believe Mr. Watcher is loading a T2 torpedo from the stern torpedo storage into the tube itself. As you can see, it's moving, and I didn't tell anybody to do that, so that's definitely Mr. Watcher doing his torpedo-y kinds of jobs. So let's look at our bow storage. We have access to T1 torpedoes and T2 torpedoes. We have 3 T2s in storage. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of torpedoes. T1 is the original absolute prototype for torpedoes that we have access to. It is a steam-propelled torpedo. It costs 800 budget. The T2 is a new upgrade. It's an electric torpedo, and it costs 900. So what are the differences between the two? Well, the T1 as a steam-propelled torpedo will actually make bubbles in the water. So if you were to fire a T1 at a warship, someone who's definitely looking out for such things, they can see the torpedo coming and have a possibility of maneuvering out of the way, or at least throwing off your shot. So T1s, while extraordinarily useful, are not very useful against warships, because if they see them coming, they're going to know you're there long before the torpedo hits. That being said, the range of the T1 is fantastic. I have absolutely no worries about taking a pot shot from 6, even 7 kilometers away from a ship with a T1. They are highly, highly accurate torpedoes. Now the T2s, they run very, very quietly. They will still show up in your map as having a bubble trail because, again, early access, but the warships cannot see the trail of the T2s. So this is an excellent choice when it comes to dealing with warships. However, the T2 has a much higher dud rate, which means to say you warm them up, you prep them, you fire them, they hit the side of the other ship, put a dent in it, and sink to the bottom. Now, this dud percentage is fairly low, something to the tune of 15 to 20%, but it is 15 to 20%. So the T2s may not be the way to go if you're worried about taking out a lot of targets very quickly. Secondly to that, the T2's range is not fantastic. I have found that roughly around the 4 to 5 kilometer mark, T2s are not very accurate. Plus they have an increased chance of dudding out the farther away your target is. So my plan is here, and what I recommend, is we're going to sell these T2s back to the warehouse and buy T1s in their place. So we're just going to right click here, right click here, right click here, and we've made back 2,700 budgets. Isn't that fantastic? So let's take a T1, move it over. And unfortunately, you have to drag one at a time and hit the transfer button in between every single one, or you can simply right click on it and move them a little faster. We're down to 3,400, 2654, 1854. We got enough for one more torpedo, but we haven't even looked at items yet. Let's take a look at the items. Okay, what can we see? We've got access to a helmet, which we've already explained in the last video. Coffee. This is excellent for giving your, let's say, observation officer a quick boost of energy when you absolutely need it the most. We have small arms. Small arms currently in build 126 have no function. So you could waste the money in buying them, but currently they absolutely have no function in game. I expect something to come out in later builds, but for now, let's leave small arms alone. We have breathing apparatus, rebreathers. We already have 2 equipped. Now, it might be nice to have a spare, but realistically, we just don't have the budget for it. So we're going to have to leave this one here and hope for the best. You have diving suits, which will allow you to dive to a wreck. Now, if you sink a ship in very shallow water, below 300 meters water, less than 300 meters water, that makes more sense, you could actually have one of your crew put on this diving suit and dive to the wreck in search of salvage. I've done it myself. It was very, very difficult. It took a long time, and I got some canned bread. In fact, I got 4 canned bread. So this may not be a viable option just yet. Now, you'll see later in game that some enemy ships will carry secret technologies from the Allied forces. Now, this may come in handy later on down the road with more improved builds where you could dive down to gain access to that technology. But currently, we don't have a lot of use for it. Coffee, again, we've got 4 aboard. I'd like to take more, but realistically, we just don't have the money. I'd rather more torpedoes. Now, that stern torp is done loading, so we have 1 in the stern, we have 4 in the front, we have 5 more being loaded into the front. I think I'm going to take more forward-facing torpedoes, honestly, because you can't interchange them. The ones loaded in the stern torpedo storage cannot be moved to the forward and vice versa. So you have to plan out what you're doing here. I think I'd rather put another one up front. Yes, and we are broke. We're broke. That's it. So we're going to say goodbye to Mr. Hans. You'll see here we've got a new icon that just lit up. U-boat is off duty for 2 days. Click here to skip the wait time. Now, we could go into time compression like we talked about in the last video, but that's still very, very slow. And the reason that it's very, very slow is because we're close to shore or at shore. You will find as we progress through the game a little bit farther that time compression reacts very, very differently the farther and farther you get from shore. When you're very close to shore, the time compression, while still faster than normal time, is painstakingly slow, something to the tune of 10 to 15 seconds for 10 minutes in-game time. And that's terrible, terrible, terrible. Now, when you get out to sea and hit that ×5 compression, you really have to keep an eye on what's going on around you, because you're going to be covering dozens and dozens of kilometers in a shot with this ×5. So what the developers have given you is I can click this little icon right here, and it's going to zip through those 2 days where they're loading equipment into our boat. I think we're going to go ahead and do that. Day 1, day 2. All right, we are loaded up, and it is now nighttime. Mr. Hagenow, you need no helpers to sleep. Why don't you take a look in the storeroom for me? All right, we've definitely moved those rounds to the deck gun, so the deck gun is absolutely maxed out. That's fantastic. We do have those replacement parts to give to our chief engineer. we are still lacking on food. We don't have a ton of food. However, in the galley, we have enough to get us through quite some time at sea. So I think we're going to risk it and just hammer out with the food we've got. Mr. Oldorp, let's go over to the storage room and get those replacement parts to you. Excellent, fantastic. So now he has replacement parts and a rebreather, as well as Mr. Watcher. So our mechanics, our engineers, are currently perfectly outfitted to save the day in case anything goes wrong. So when it comes to storage, again, we touched on the fact that you can store deck rounds in your storage room, you can store food, you can store whatever it is you're going to need aboard, and we can even find extra places to cram things. But it's important to note that your cabinet, for instance, could not take food, it can't take spare parts, nothing of the sort. But we could, chances are, open up our flak gun area and move some food from the storage room to below the decks by the flak gun. And it turns out, absolutely, yes, we could move those vegetables, carrots, and such right underneath the deck plates of the flak gun. And that would free up extra room in our storage room. Very important to note, very important to keep as much room as you can while you're going to be heading out on longer voyages. Because again, food is going to be very important, as well as the maximum amount of ammunition you can possibly take. Okay, so we've talked to the warehouse and we've made sure we've outfitted our boat as best we can. Our galley is as stocked as it's going to get. Our torpedoes are all loaded aboard, well, to the best of our abilities. We've given some equipment to some certain members to make sure that we are as optimized for battle as we can be. So let's zip on out back to the dock and talk about a few things we skipped over in the last video. Now, in the last video, I showed you the crew management screen to move some people around, move your officers, move your crew, so on and so forth. And in fact, I just realized we have to put these two guys back on board. At the same time, you could go talk to the recruitment officer right over here, Mr. Wolfgang Mayer. So long as you have someone selected, an officer, it doesn't have to be the skipper, you can talk to the recruitment officer. Captain, this may be your new crew. Let me know if you want to see their files. You have the options of show me their files, which opens up the recruitment menu. I will choose crew for the next assignment, opens up the crew management window, which we were just in, or goodbye. We won't bother with crew management because I've already talked about it, but let's talk a little bit about the recruitment menu. So you can see here it gives you a list of ordinary sailors. You can use these people to replace sailors that you may, unfortunately, have lost in the line of duty, and you limp back to port with not exactly a full complement. So if you just click here, you can buy crew members for 250 budgets. But if we click firsthand here, you'll actually get a little write-up. For instance, Manfred Hoffman, he is a brawler. When the fight comes, he's on the first line, a natural-born soldier, cleans his shoes every day. Wolfgang Schultz, on the other hand, is a playboy and reveler. He joined the army because it is easier to pick up girls in uniform. He is too big for his boots, and so on and so forth. What you're going to find in this recruitment screen, and indeed in your management screen, a lot of repeated names, a lot of repeated biographies. And again, this is an early access game. This isn't fleshed out. There are mods you can pick up on Steam to flesh this out a little bit more, but we're not really going to dive into that just yet. Currently, we don't need any personnel, so this screen is not going to be too much use to us, so we'll just dive out and say goodbye. Thank you for that, Mr. Wolfgang. Select our skipper, Mr. Klaus Graf. Now, for this gentleman over here by the fancy car, he is our leading officer. You can consider him the CO of our flotilla or dock or boat, or I'm not sure. So long as you have your skipper selected, you can go over and talk to the leading officer. Klaus Schmid is our leading officer, and he says that the Admiralty is deeply impressed by our last patrol. So let's look at our options here. Are there any orders from the Admiralty, which opens up 9-minute selection menu? Number 2 is I would like to ask a few favors. 3 is my crew needs a break. 4 is what's new in headquarters. So let's head on through these one at a time. Are there any orders from the Admiralty? These are the current orders, your eyes only. Here we go, the mission selection screen. So we have 3 options of missions, and ordinarily you will always have 3. And it will show you where you will be operating, and it will give you a blurb about what you're doing. So the top one is considered easy, as it's a single green bar. The objectives are to travel to Sector BE, which is highlighted center of the screen. it will give us a reward of 10,000 budgets. So what do we have to do? Head on out there, and we have to travel 2,000 kilometers inside this square. So the amount of travel it takes to get to and from the square will not count towards our mission completion. But once we get to the square itself, we will have to travel 2,000 kilometers inside it. Sounds easy enough. We have additional objectives of sink the enemy trade ships with a gross register tonnage of 4,000 tons. Now, for the most part, enemy trade ships weigh a fair bit, so realistically 4 to 5 ships would get you your 4,000 tons. If we managed to sink those 4,000 tons, we would get an additional 10,000 budget, plus we would receive a plus 33% to our reputation, which would be fantastic. So on top of doing the mission and sinking ships, you would get an additional 33% worth of reputation on top of that. We have the bonus of some intelligence down here. The weather is expected to be calm and easy in this area. That's fantastic. No choppy seas, no fog banks. That sounds great. We also have another mission, which is also to patrol Sector BE, which is, again, an early access game kind of thing. Same idea, head on out to BE, travel 2,250 kilometers inside at 2,250 instead of the 2,000 as before, and we could get an additional 5,000 budget out of the deal. Additional objectives, they want us to sink 7,000 tons. Now, a quick blurb on the enemy trade ships. When they say enemy trade ships, they really truly mean enemy trade ships. You will run into neutral trade ships and you will run into warships. Neither one of those will count as your total with your GRT, your gross registered tonnage. If we manage to sink those ships, we'd get an extra 15,000 reward on top of that, and instead of extra reputation, they would actually give us an additional leader officer. So we wouldn't have to use our points later on to promote a new officer, because we'd get one free. Now, intelligence of this area is increased presence of enemy escort ships. By enemy escort ships, they mean, sure, the trade route, which is running from the UK on down through the Atlantic to the Americas. Definitely going to be a lot of ships in this area, but there's going to be a lot of escort ships, a lot of warships, a lot of guns. And again, this would be considered a slightly more difficult mission with the 2 yellow bars. Our third option is attack at Portsmouth Harbor. This would be considered very hard. It's got 3 red bars. We are supposed to sneak into Portsmouth, sink 2 ships that are corvette size, so that is warship, basically the lowest level of warship you can run into on the open ocean, or larger. Use intelligence collected recently in HQ to avoid the port defenses. So we've done no research in HQ about port defenses. Ergo, I don't think we should be taking this one just yet. The reward would be fantastic at 40,000 budget, 100% extra reputation, and Mr. Huey Wagner, who is a radio officer, would be granted to us for completing this mission. However, I think that's going to be a little advanced for the level we're at currently. So our choices are between BE, easy, and BE, harder. And since I'm hoping that these tutorials are going to show you all the things I can possibly think of to show you, we're going to be taking the harder one and hope we run into some enemy escorts, some aircraft, so on and so forth. So we're actually going to select Patrol Sector BE level medium. Fantastic. It gives us our new objective up top here. Travel 2,250 kilometers inside the marked area. We also could be sinking the enemy trade ships with a total GRT of 7,000 tons. So that was option 1. Option 2, I would like to ask a few favors. What do we got? So this is using your reputation points, which we touched on in the last video. Over here in the top right, you can see we have 0 points to use. However, if we did have points, we could buy anything that's light gray. We could buy free roam, the ability to leave port without assignments. Very important to note, we can't actually go to sea without an assignment from the Admiralty. We already have access to Headquarters Influence 1. Opens up the possibility to send officers on missions in Headquarters. That one the game gives to you gratis, so you can start researching right away if you wanted to. Influence 2, we could actually run 2 research missions in Headquarters at the same time. But again, we have a reputation point budget of 0, so these are not open to us. What else do we have? My crew needs a break, available in 5 days. This is very, very useful when you've completed your patrol. We talked a little bit about the discipline system in the last video, and part of the discipline issues that you're going to run into with morale is weariness, fatigue. Once you've gone on a long mission and you come home, your crew is going to keep that negative multiplier of fatigue. So you're going to want to give them a break. A break is available every 7 days. So if you sail for 7 days and come home, you could send your crew on vacation right away. And there are multiple different vacations available, giving you different multipliers on certain things, which we'll be able to show you after we complete our first patrol. And lastly, what's new in headquarters, which will open up the headquarters screen, which we touched on in the last video. Okay, we have ourselves a mission. We have a boat kitted out with everything we can possibly think of. I think the next idea would be to head to sea and start sinking them ships. So what we're going to do is hit our M key to bring up our map. Also, something to note, if you just take off from the dock and some of your personnel are just hanging out here, don't worry, you haven't left them behind. They're going to magically teleport onto your boat. So we're going to hit the M key, bring up the map. We're going to scroll way on in to our ship. And, it's dark and kind of foggy. We are going to plot a course in this direction. We're going to make a waypoint in this direction. Scroll out. Waypoint. Waypoint. And again, I'm doing this by holding the shift key. If you don't hold the shift key, you can't make another waypoint that attaches to your previous one. Shift key. Shift key. And we're going to be heading on out to Sector BE. Hit the M key again to bring us back to our ship. Okay, we've set a course and we're not moving. What we have to do is open up our telegraph, our engine speed, and we're going to head on out at forward, let's say forward 3. Bloop. Boat drops into the water, engines fire up, as we can see right here. The props start spinning, and that's it. We're off to the races. We are heading to sea to complete our mission in Sector BE. And that is how we kit out our ship. If there's anything I didn't touch on that you're still not clear about, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Consider hitting the like button and subscribe if you haven't already to carry on with our tutorials, tips, and tricks on this excellent title. I have been Lightly Salted. Thanks for watching. Bye now.